And welcome, everyone. I'm Garrett Weinzierl, and I have two guests today. They are Catherine Brewer, who is an assistant professor in chemical engineering, and Ali Amiri, who is a PhD candidate in chemical engineering. Thank you both for joining me today.
Thank you for having us.
So, what project are you here to talk about today?
Our project is desalinating brackish water using biomass energy, in very simple words.
Okay. And for those who may not be aware, might be myself included, what is biomass energy?
So we're using biomass waste, which includes like agricultural residues, yard waste, municipal solid waste, those types of things. And we use that energy to desalinate water. And that water can be brackish water, seawater, any types of saline water. But specifically, our project is focused on brackish water, which is the well water in New Mexico, which is pretty saline.
Okay. All right. So how long did you work on this project? Like when was the idea sparked, and how long was the entire process?
The idea came in 2013. I was a new professor here at NMSU, and I was developing a proposal for the Bureau of Reclamation, and they're very interested in water treatment technologies, especially water treatment technologies for removing salt. I'm a biomass thermochemical person, which means that my research focuses on how do I use these residues that Ali described to produce energy, materials, to take care of system needs. And the idea for the project was, how do we couple what we're good at, which is biomass pyrolysis, with something that the Bureau of Reclamation is looking to do, which is desalinate water. And so for this project, that's how it started. We are now 3 years into the project, and just last year we decided to investigate, can this technology be commercialized? Is there any commercial feasibility for it? And that's where we began to look at the National Science Foundation I Corps program.
Okay. Can you tell me more about the NSF I Corps program and how that works? Was this your first time working with the NSF?
This was our first time working on the commercialization side of the NSF. I've worked with the NSF on research grants and fellowships and things, but this is a very different side of the NSF, where they take research that's been developed through their grants in university laboratories, and they have the researchers, the PIs like me, the entrepreneurial leads, the grad students, go out and talk to the people who might buy the products. One of the reasons they have us do that is because we think we're solving a problem, and we think we know exactly what that problem is. Once you start talking to the people who really have the problems, the NSF found, and many other agencies have found, that there's a mismatch between the problems that the researchers think they're solving and the problems that are really there. And so we wanted to participate in the I Corps process to better understand what problem we're really trying to solve. Are we doing it at the right size? Are we doing it at the right concentration? Do we have a good match between the unit we're trying to build and a unit that someone would use?
Okay. Now, you say they go out and they talk to potential customers so you can learn if you're on the right track. Now, how much of that is kind of in the NSF's court? Do they already know exactly who to go and talk to, or do you assist in that process? Do you give them kind of a target demographic?
Okay, we started with bunch of customer segments that we thought they might be interested in. So all of that was just ourselves, the PI and I. We thought, okay, who might this water is gonna be used for, and who this technology will be useful for. So we chose a couple like customer segments. Like we said, okay, battery manufacturers would use distilled water, which is what we produce. Pharmaceutical industries, they have use of distilled water. So different customer segments. And then we started narrowing it down until we reached like to 1 or 2 customer segments, and we focus on that. So at the beginning, we started with like 6 or 7 customer segments, but as we went forward, we figured out, for example, they either do not have the biomass waste, or they need very like very pure water, which they call it ultra pure water. So these types of things. So those things that we found helped us narrow down within the first 2 weeks of the customer discovery interviews. And then we ended up with 1 or 2 customer segments at the end.
Oh, all right. And what were those 1 or 2 customer segments?
So after the 7-week period, we ended up with the rural communities in Honduras, Latin America, and like in general, rural communities in southwestern U.S. which do not have any access to water. The reason that we approached Honduras in particular was that they do have a lot of biomass waste that they are using. About 70% of their energy is based on the firewood. So we focused on that customer segment a little bit, talked to them, and we figured out that is not actually the good market to go because most of the business over there are nonprofit organizations. So this is not a way to go for startup companies. And so basically this was the main one that we talked to at the end.
Okay. And so the 2 that you ended up with at the end were those 2 potential customers that you had originally come up with, or was this something that you discovered while working with the NSF?
No, we found it as we went forward towards the customer interview. So the way that I ended up with those 2 customer segments was that I talked to one of the people here in New Mexico, and who was the municipal clerk of one of the cities here, Hatch, in New Mexico, and then he encouraged me to contact those people in rural communities in Honduras, and that was how the conversation started.
Okay. This whole process of going through the customer discovery sounds fascinating. I mean, it sounds like it was your first time going through this. Did you enjoy the process? Was it fun to keep going from one point to the next as you learned who your next potential customer could be?
That the encouragement was the encouragement of people who, for example, I talked to this guy, I thought that this technology is going to be useful for them, and then they encouraged me to contact another one, or they introduced me to somebody else. I really enjoyed this process of making connections with people, how people introduce me to the guy that I need to talk to. And I do not really. I was super excited when I took a look back at the beginning and where I was, and then at the end how I ended up with talking to Honduras, with people in Spanish talking Spanish that I do not know the language. That was where I used. I asked my mentor to help me to talk to them because I did not know their language. So this process was very interesting for me, how people can help us reach to a point that we are looking for to go.
I must say that the process was not comfortable at first, because in customer discovery, you don't really fit into any boxes that people usually have when communicating with others. Usually you're there as a salesperson to sell something, and we weren't selling anything. Or you're there to buy something, and we weren't buying anything. We just wanted to talk to people. And it took a long time for us to figure out how to introduce ourselves in a way that helped people understand we weren't there to buy or sell anything, because our situation to them sounded really weird. Why are you talking to me was the general impression that you get at first. And I can tell you the first few interviews did not go particularly smoothly. There were quite a few misunderstandings of why are we here, what are we doing, why are you asking us all these questions? And towards the end, we came up with a better understanding of what our interviewees were expecting, and therefore we could help them better understand who we are and what we wanted. But it's not an activity many people usually engage in, either as the customer or the customer discoverer. So that took a while to get comfortable with that process.
Right. That does make a lot.
This really happened to me actually, because the first about 20 interviews, many people just hang up the phone. They did not want to communicate. And as we went forward, by the last week, actually the opposite thing happened, and I was the one who was telling them, hey, I gotta go, please let me go. And they just kept talking for an hour, 2 hours. And that was interesting because it was exactly the opposite that it was happening at the beginning. And that showed me that, hey, I've learned how to approach these people, how to start communicating with them, how to talk to them so that they do not want me to leave. And they even like follow up with me afterwards. They keep sending me emails. Hey, what did you do? How's your technology is going? And I was the one to say, I'm back to the lab. Sorry, I don't have time to focus on this now. So this, which is still happening. They're still communicating with me. What did you do? Do you want to collaborate? Do you want to start working? I say, no, please, not now. I will get back to you later.
You have a dissertation to finish.
Yes.
So what do you at the beginning? What did you find that you were doing wrong that was keeping people from opening up to you, from giving you the information that you were trying to get from them? And then what did you change? What did you start doing to get them to talk to you?
One of the things that changed with our approach is the need to make it very clear to the people at the beginning that we are here to listen, we are here to understand. We are not buying anything, we are not selling anything, and just clearing up that potential misunderstanding from the beginning. It was a little easier in New Mexico because as a new professor, I can honestly say, I'm new at NMSU, I haven't lived in New Mexico very long, I'm trying to understand my constituents. So New Mexico wasn't too bad because as soon as I said that, most people just blah, 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 blah. They were quite happy to talk to us. In other places that we visited, it was a little more difficult because there was still this initial hesitation of people of this person is trying to sell me something. I need to prevent them from selling me something. And that making it clear to people that you were there to listen and there to learn really helped take down some of those barriers that people put up to strangers.
That makes a lot of sense. And I completely understand that. It's a very natural reaction to have, right? When someone you've never met reaches out to you, because it is essentially a cold call. And what do we all associate with cold calls? Oh, salesmen, sales pitches.
We also found it very helpful to come with a reference. This person told me to talk to you. And often as soon as you said the name of a person that they knew, they were much more willing to help.
Okay.
You approach it as I'm trying to learn this information. I talked to this person that you know, and they said that you would be someone who could help me learn this information.
That sounds like a great piece of advice for anyone out there who's trying to further their customer research.
Exactly. So introduction, so we found that is very important. So as we went forward, rather than like contacting them right away, I starting to communicating with them a little bit before I make a call, like through emails, like through the social media, like LinkedIn. And once they know me, then I made a phone call, and that helped a lot. That made the conversation go very smoothly.
Okay, so touching base before you actually got into a long-form conversation with them.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Right.
kind of giving them
Because when I called them, then I didn't have to introduce myself, who I am, because I already did that. They already have seen my profile in LinkedIn. They know who I am. They know what I'm working on. So that way I could communicate with them much easier, and they were not like taking a guard to see, hey, you are a salesperson. They knew who I am. They know what I'm looking for, and those types of things.
Okay. And what information would you give them ahead of time, specifically, when you were contacting them through social media?
Well, I just told them that this is Ali. I'm a PhD candidate in chemical engineering. I'm working on a project, and I would like to learn more about what your company is doing and what problems specifically you're struggling with, and where this technology might fit in future. However, I did not tell this upfront. Later on, I mentioned that in like following emails. But that was how it started. So I started about learning. I need to learn about your technologies. I need to learn about your problems, difficulties that you're struggling with. And that way I could help them talk about the problems that they have. Many of the times, the problems that they had nothing to do with the technology that we had. But that was still very good because it gave us insight to how to pivot the business model towards their difficulties and towards solving their difficulties and problems.
It almost sounds like it's this balancing act when you're reaching out to someone to figure out how much information to present to them, at least at first, so you don't kind of overload them.
That's a good point. So we learn through our mentors and our instructors that we need to be silent and have them talk. So we just gave them just a little information, enough to start the conversation, and then we were quiet. And they were the ones who talking to us. And if they ask us some questions, we would answer. If not, they were the one who were talking about their problems, about their processes, about what they need in particular, those types of things. I was not talking a lot during the conversations.
And so, and that was, I'm assuming, the difference from when it was less successful to when it was. Did you when it was beginning? I'm assuming you were doing a lot of the talking.
We were doing a lot of stumbling over trying to introduce ourselves.
Okay.
And also, one of the challenges about doing customer discovery is they tell you, our instructors taught us, don't talk about your technology. This conversation is not about your technology. This conversation is about your customer. And that's really hard when you're a professor, when you're a PhD student, and your life is talking about and reading about what it is you're doing. And if you think you have something fantastic, you want to talk about it. And not talking about it can be much harder.
Right. It's difficult to explain why you're there in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
It's that
so
difficulty.
we could say something like, I'm a professor at this institution. We're working on a research project around water desalination and biomass energy. Can you tell us more about who you are and what you do? Okay. And many times it wouldn't be just a conversation. We went to visit at a food processing plant in Albuquerque, thinking we would talk to the production manager for 10, 15 minutes. And that's what you ask for when you set up the interview, 10 or 15 minutes. And sometimes that's all you get. But sometimes they'll say, oh, would you like a tour? Oh, would you like samples? Oh, would you like to see? 2-3 hours later, you finally leave the building because they're so excited to not just tell you about what they're doing, but to show you. And those are the interviews that are a lot of fun.
It sounds like you have to be fluid. And Ali, you even mentioned earlier that you were talking to these people to learn how you should pivot. So it seems like you should almost go in expecting that you're going to have to pivot, because as you're listening to their problems, you may learn that what you thought their issue was that you were trying to solve is actually not the issue you thought they had.
Exactly. And another thing was that sometimes the problem was not ourselves. The problem was that we were talking to the wrong people. Mm-hmm. So when we talked to the right people, they were very eager to answer our questions and talk to us. So even though we were disappointed sometimes, I was disappointed many times. I was so nervous that my interviews were very low, interview counts were very low, and I'm not reaching to the point that I was supposed to reach. But when I thought the process about the process and I saw how the process moved, I figured out I needed to write to to talk to the right person. And sometimes I was talking to the guy who was not in charge of this thing, this part of this sector of the company, or they were afraid to talk about it, or they were not responsible about these types of things at all. So they directed me to the guy that I really needed to talk to.
Oh, that's great. I'm assuming the more you did it, the better you got at finding the person you should be speaking with.
Exactly.
And we learned very quickly that you call the main office line, you introduce yourself very briefly, and instead of jumping right into your questions for the poor person that answered the phone, the thing you ask them is, this is what I'm looking to learn. Who should I talk to? Then you get two pieces of information. You get the information of the person you should talk to, and you get a referral name. Because now you can say, I called the front desk and blah, blah, blah told me to talk to you. And that makes the conversation start much easier.
Oh, that's great. So you get to basically create your own referrals if you didn't have one going in.
Exactly.
And just by asking the question, who should I talk to?
Okay. That's great. It's very. I'm finding this very funny at this point because I conduct many interviews as you're now learning, and it's very similar to getting an interviewee booked if you're trying to get someone on that you've never spoken to before.
And many times we contacted about like 10 people, and out of those 10 people, just 1 or 2 we were successful to talk to. So we did about 109 interviews in total, but I can for sure say that I contacted more than 400 people, so that I could talk at least to 100 of them.
Wow. You have to get used to fairly low success rates. And as long as you can get used to that and also get used to being wrong a lot, customer discovery is fun.
Yeah, it sounds like this is, I could see where this is something a lot of researchers may not expect as part of their job, but it sounds like this is a very large portion of the work that needs to be done.
I knew that my perspective on customers had changed when just a month ago, one of my collaborators came to me with an idea for a new version of research we've been trying to get started for a long time. And the first thing out of my mouth was, well, have you talked to these people? And she looked at me like, why would I talk to them? And the customer discovery training that I had just finished a few weeks before was screaming, how can you propose a problem that you're going to solve in a research proposal until you've talked to the people who would use it? And then I looked at myself at the mirror and went, oh, what has happened to me? I've been brainwashed.
Yeah, you just think of yourself however long ago it was before you started pursuing customer discovery.
Yes. Once you see the benefit of doing it, you start looking for it all the time. It becomes automatic. And you wonder how you did research before without going through this process.
It sounds like it reached a new level of practicality, because now you can put a face to your consumer.
Mm-hmm. And in your proposals, you can say, I've talked to 10 people, 6 out of the 10 said this wasn't their issue, but this was their issue, therefore I'm proposing to do this. And now I know as a proposal reviewer, I'm going to be very brutal of, did you talk to people? If you didn't talk to people, how do you know that what you're proposing to do is worthwhile?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it's a very good lesson to instill in any up and coming researchers, is giving them these tools to be able to go out and talk to their customer base one-to-one.
Yes, it's a tedious, painful, and often awkward process. But like most important things you need to learn how to do, the first attempts are painful, tedious, and awkward. But you're much better off for it when you're done.
Right. It's just like anything else. You need to learn from your mistakes. The only way you're going to get better at it is practicing it.
Mm-hmm.
True.
So, and as we're winding down, any other tips you would give to anyone who is starting to try and discover their customers?
Make sure you have plenty of time. One of the mistakes that we found you can make in scheduling interviews is you have this list of, I need to do so many interviews today. And so you schedule one at this time, one at this time, one at this time, one at this time. And if you're too inflexible in your scheduling, you miss the fantastic interviews because you don't have time to finish the conversation. Or if you have too many other things that you're working on when you're trying to do the process, you don't pay attention as well to what your customers are saying. So if I'm thinking about all of the exams I have to grade and the proposal that's due next week and the appointment I have in an hour, I'm not going to listen very well to my customer, and I might miss something very valuable. And so I would say to someone looking to do this process, try to clear your schedule and clear your head as much as you can, or you'll have valuable information go in one ear and out the other.
That's very good advice. Ali, anything that you would like to put out there for anyone that's...
I have a mentor who speaks Spanish.
Yes, have a mentor if you want to. If you want to contact, especially some technologies requires you to know some other languages. So for me, that was very helpful. However, it did not. They were not our customers or the business that we wanted to work with. But it was pretty useful. And another thing is self-confidence. Believe in yourself, and be sure that you can get this done, even though you may be rejected by many people. Many people may not want to talk to you, but just keep up the good work. That's my recommendation.
I'm also curious, how did you find your mentor who helped you with the Spanish speaking interviews?
We bribed him. It was something that was set up for us by Arrowhead Center. We had participated in Arrowhead Center kind of mini customer discovery program called Launch, and through that we got to meet some of the staff, some of the people who work on economic development, who help teams like us, and through their networks, they were able to connect us with people who were interested in our types of technology or the types of customers we thought we'd be talking to. So the Arrowhead did a lot of the networking for us in terms of finding some mentors, even finding some starting interviews.
That sounds fantastic. It sounds like they were very helpful.
Yes.
Well, that's great. It's really wonderful that you were able to find a mentor who could help you with languages that you do not speak.
And business terminology we don't understand.
Right.
Or also helping us choose our vocabulary. One of the dangers about being in an academic department is you talk all the time to people who do what you do all the time. And that extra set of eyes to make sure we were explaining ourselves clearly was incredibly helpful.
I completely understand that, because you're basically in your own little bubble where everyone knows all of the terminology, all of the buzzwords that you use on a daily basis. But the second you walk outside of that door and you try and talk to someone like me, for example, they're just going to scratch their head and go, "I'm sorry, what's biomass?"
And then we got to learn some business terms that I didn't know before. One of them was the word pivot. I hear that and think of a simple machine that you study in physics. But no, it has a very special meaning. And so I think we learned just as much new vocabulary as our colleagues did, but we learned different sets. And getting exposure to the business world makes it much more approachable and much more interesting in the future.
That's fascinating. And it's great hearing this from you, Catherine, as well. As a professor, that it's like you never stop learning. This was a major learning experience for you.
Yes. And one that I wouldn't have gotten an A in this class, which for me would be very unusual, but it was something that I would try again. Once you've done it the first time, doing it again is much easier.
Great advice. Well, Ali and Catherine, thank you so much for your time. Is there anywhere folks listening or watching out there can go to learn more about your project, other than arrowheadcenter.nmsu.edu?
Our chemical engineering department has a website where I post information about our research projects. It's cheme, so chme.nmsu.edu. And if you look up the people page, you can find Catherine Brewer on one of the links, and we have our own page. I must say it's not updated all that often. We're busy doing things like customer discovery and grading exams, but there will be information posted there, and certainly contact information if they'd like to contact either Ali or I to learn more.
Oh, wonderful. Well, thank you again for your time, both of you. It was a pleasure speaking with you, and I'm very excited to get this out there. I think this information is going to be very helpful to anyone getting into customer discovery.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.